Everyone, thank you so much for coming today. Welcome and thanks for joining us. I hope everybody's having a good day. We're so glad you could be here for Inside Asia Pacific Regulatory Trends Shaping Global Compliance. I'm Gay Esther, the marketing manager here at RegDesk, and RegDesk is the intelligent RIM with built-in regulatory intelligence, and our platform allows RA teams to leverage AI to prepare, manage, and publish international submissions smarter and faster. To focus on you for a minute, we do truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. We know you have lots of places you could be, and we're happy that you choose to be with us for the next hour. The last 5 to 10 minutes we will save for Q&A. So while we're going through the webinar, please make sure to drop in your questions in the chat section or in the Q&A section. We'll pull from both of those at the end, and Kartika will answer questions at the end, and we will have Jody, also our Director of Regulatory, joining us as well at that time. So we will share the slide deck and the replay along with any unanswered questions if we are not able to get to all of them at the end of the webinar, and that will come out by the end of the week, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. Now let me take a moment to introduce our esteemed speaker. We have Kartika Puri, and she is a regulatory affairs professional here at RegDesk, where she has experience supporting global medical device compliance across multiple international markets, including Asia Pacific, which she'll be talking about today. Kartika specializes in regulatory strategy, market entry requirements, and lifecycle management, helping organizations navigate complex and evolving regulatory frameworks with clarity and competence. And like I mentioned before, we also have Jody Granger, our Director of Regulatory Affairs, joining us for the Q&A session, and she's in here now as well. So she'll be able to answer any questions along with Kartika at the end of the webinar. Thank you both for joining us, Jody and Kartika. And Kartika, we'll go ahead and let you get started.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kartika, and I am Asia Data QA and Team Lead at RegDesk. It's pleasure to be here with you all and talk about regulatory trends happening around Asia for the global expansion. Now, before we dive in, I want to start with a simple thought. When companies think about expanding into Asia, they often think about opportunity, large population, growing healthcare system, increasing demand for medical devices, and all of that is absolutely true. But at the same time, APEC is one of the most complex regulatory regions in the world. Unlike Europe or the US, where you have more centralized system, Asia consists of multiple countries, each with its own regulatory authority, its own documentation expectation, and its own approval timelines. So today, my goal is not just to explain regulations, but to help you understand how to navigate this complexity strategically, that you can enter these markets faster with fewer delays and with lower risk. As introduced earlier, the regulatory strategy today plays much a role in the regulatory compliance. It is directly linked to the business success. From my experience, I'm working around across the multiple APEC markets, including China, Japan, South Korea, and Southeast Asia. I have seen that companies that succeed are not necessarily the ones with the best product, but the one that has a best regulatory planning. For example, two companies may have a similar device, but one enters the market in 6 months and the other takes 18 months. Why? Because one company understood the regulatory pathway, leveraged existing approvals, and prepared right documentation from the beginning. The one that had to go through the multiple rounds of question delays and resubmission. So today, what I will share with you is not just the theory. These are the practical insight based on the real challenges companies face when they are entering in the APAC region. And by the end of a session, you will have a much clearer roadmap of how to approach this region. So let's take a moment to walk through today's roadmap. First, we'll start with the current regulatory trends in APAC. It is important because regulations are evolving very quickly, and understanding these trends help you stay ahead instead of reacting later. Then we'll move into the approval system, documentation, and clinical evidence expectations. This is where the most companies face challenges because requirements are becoming more detailed and more demanding. After that, we will discuss strategic considerations for the market entry. This is really core of today's session. How to think strategically when entering multiple Asian market. We will also cover different markets entry pathway because choosing the right pathway can significantly reduce your timeline. Then we will look common submission pitfalls. This is very important because most delays are actually avoidable. Then finally, we'll talk about the post-market requirements and risk reduction strategies because compliance does not stop after approval. So overall, this session is designed to give you both the high-level understanding and the practical guidance. So moving to the next slide. Yeah. Yeah. Now look at the key regulatory trends in APAC. The first major trend is regulatory harmonization and reliance pathway. In simple terms, this means countries are starting to trust each other regulatory decision. For example, if your device is already approved in Singapore, Malaysia, you may use that approval to shorten the review process. This is a huge shift from past where every country require a completely independent review. Why this is happening? Because many regulatory authorities have limited resources and they want to improve efficiency while still ensuring safety. The second trend is digitalization. Regulators are moving toward the online system, electronic submission, and automated tracking. This reduce paperwork, speed up the communication, and improve the transparency. For example, instead of waiting weeks for updates, you can now track your application status online. The third trend is rise of the digital health and AI regulations. This is with the more software-based devices entering in the market these days. Regulators are creating new frameworks to handle them. For example, China's approach to AI updates allow control changes without the full approval. This shows that the regulator are trying to keep up with the innovations, but they still expect a strong safety evidence. Uh, yeah. Now let's move on to another one. The approval system are evolving in the Asia Pacific region as well. One of the biggest shift that we have seen moving towards the risk based regulatory framework. What does that mean in simple term? It means that the regulator are no longer treating all devices in the same way. Instead, they are focusing more on a higher risk devices. They are simply processing for the simple processes for the low risk devices. For example, a simple non-invasive devices like thermometer may go through a relative quick notification or a simplified review process. But if you are dealing with the high risk devices such as an implant and a life supporting system, a level of a scrutiny is much higher, including the detailed technical review, clinical evidence, and sometimes even a local testing is also required. This approach helps regulators to use their resources more efficiently, but it also means that the manufacturer must clearly understand where the device fits within the classification system. Another important trend is increase use of accelerated and reliance pathway. This is really important one. Many APEC companies are now allowing the company to leverage approvals from the well-established regulatory authority such as the US FDA, European Union, or even the Singapore Health Science Authority. For example, if your device is already approved in one market, you may not need to start from a scratch in another country. Instead, the regulator can conduct an abridged review focusing only on a one country's specific requirement. However, this only works if your documentation is aligned and properly structured. So the key here is approval is no longer just about submitting documents. It's about choosing the right pathway based on your device, your existing approvals, and your target market. Now let's talk about the documentation, which is most critical aspect of any regulatory submission. Across APAC, we are seeing the clear shift towards the more detailed structure and standardized documentation. Regulators expect more. Regulator expect complete picture of your device. This include not just your device, what does what device does, but how it is designed, manufactured, tested, and controlled throughout its life cycle. Typically, your documentation will include device description, intended use, designs, manufacturing process, risk management files, performance and safety testing, labeling, and IFUs as well. Uh, another one important document is quality management system information. But one of the most important thing and something many companies underestimate is consistency across those documents. For example, your intended use statement must match exactly across all sections. Your labeling, your clinical evaluation report, your technical file. Even small difference in a
Kartika, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to let you know that currently it's still showing the trend slide, so I'm not sure if you have advanced slides or not.
yeah, I'm just gonna conclude this one. The next one is
Okay, thank you. I just
yeah.
wanted to be sure. Sorry.
Yeah. So, uh, coming back, sometimes company assume that because they have approval in one country, the same document will work everywhere, but that is not the always the case. Different countries may have a specific formatting requirements, additional data expectation, or a local standards. So a good practice is to conduct a pre-submission internal review, almost like an audit, to ensure that your documentation is complete, consistent, and aligned with the target country's requirement. Think of your submission as a telling story, connect with clearly and logically. So, yeah, another one. Let me move to the next slide. Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to the clinical evidence, which is becoming increasingly important across the region. Regulators are placing a much stronger emphasis on demonstrating that your device is both safe and effective. For lower risk devices that may involve using existing literature, performance data, or demonstrating equivalence to an already approved device. But for higher risk devices, the expectations are much higher. You may need clinical evaluation report, clinical trial data, real world evidence, post market data from other countries. In some cases, regulator may also require local clinical data. For example, in China, a local clinical trial are often required unless your device qualifies for exemption. Why it is important? Because regulator want to ensure that the device perform well in in their specific population and the healthcare environment. This is where many companies face delay because they don't plan that clinical strategy. They don't plan their clinical strategy early enough. If you wait until submission stage to think about clinical requirements, it can add months or even years to your timeline. So, a key takeaway here is clinical evidence is not just a regulatory requirements, it's a strategic component of your market entry plan. The earlier you plan it, the smoother your approval process will be. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. Now we move on into what would I say is the most important part of the presentation is strategic consideration for market entry. Because at the end of the day, success in APAC is not just about meeting regulatory requirements, it's about making the right strategic decision early. At the the first thing to understand is that Asia is not just a single market. Each country operates independently, its own regulatory authority, its own requirements, and its own expectation. So the one size doesn't fit all approach simply doesn't work here. For example, the approach you take for Japan, which has very structured and predictable regulatory system, will be very different from what you need in China, where requirements can be more complex and may include local testing. Similarly, Southeast Asia has a mix of harmonized framework and a country-specific differences. So your strategy needs to be flexible and tailored to each market. This is why companies take time to plan their entry strategy properly, tend to perform much better in a long run. Let's go a bit deeper into these strategic considerations. First, navigating diverse regulatory landscape. You need to understand each country classification system, approval pathways, timelines, and documentation requirements. Second, leveraging the global approval. If you already have a FDA clearance or a CE marking, use that strategically to access faster in the pathway in the countries that offer reliance mechanisms. Third, building strong local partnership. Local representative or the authorized agent are not just a regulatory requirement. They are a key point of your contact with the authority. They help with the submission, communication, and the post-market responsibilities. Another one is generating local clinical and real-world evidence. This is especially important for high-risk devices and a market like South Korea and China. Moving to next, pricing and reimbursement strategy. Even after the approval, your product needs to be commercially viable. And the final one, another one is supply chain and localization. Some countries may require local testing, local labeling, or even local manufacturing consideration. So overall, success in APAC requires a combination of regulatory knowledge and a business strategy. Let's move on to the next slide where we will be discussing about the market entry pathways. Yeah, this is the slide for the market entry pathways. Now, broadly, there are four main types. The first one is the standard or a full registration pathway. This is the most comprehensive route and is typically required for high-risk devices. It involves full technical documentation, clinical data, and the detailed review by the regulatory authority. Second is the abridged order, which another words we call a reliance pathway. This allows you to leverage approvals from the recognized regulatory authorities. For example, if you have device which is already approved in US or EU, some countries may conduct a shorter review based on the approval. The third one is an innovative or a fast track pathway. This is designed for novel and breakthrough technologies such as AI based devices or life saving innovations. These pathways often include priority review and direct communication with the regulators. The fourth one is the self declaration or notification pathway. Usually, this is for the low risk devices. Here, the process is much simpler and faster. So, choosing the right pathway is critical. It can significantly reduce your time to market and help you allocate resources more efficiently. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah. So in this slide, I will discuss about the common submission pitfalls. Yeah. Now let's move into the very practical and important part of today's discussion, that is common submission pitfalls and how to avoid the delays. From our experiencing working across the multiple APAC markets, the one thing is very clear. The most regulatory delays are not due to the complexity of the markets. So it's because of how you're submitting your documents, how you have done your uh, technical review. That's where the delays are happening. So understanding these pitfalls can save you a significant amount of time, cost, and effort. Let's start with the first one. The most common issue is incorrect device classification. The device in the most APAC countries are classified based on the risk, typically from low risk to high risk. Now the challenge is that the classification rules can vary from country to country. So device that has classified as class 2 in a one country may fall under a different category in another. If a classification is incorrect, regulator may reject your submission or ask you to resubmit under different pathway, which can delay your timeline significantly. So what should you do? Always conduct a country-specific classification assessment before the submission. Use official classification database where available. If needed, confirm your classification with the local regulator expert, or even through the pre-submission consultation with the regulatory. Moving on, the another one, we have a incomplete or inconsistent technical documentation. This is another major cause of delay. Regulator expect a complete and well-structured technical dossier. If a document is missing, outdated, or inconsistent, for example, if your intended use differs across the document, it immediately raises a question. So once you receive a deficiency letter, each round of response can add several weeks to your timeline. So to avoid this, it's important to prepare a complete technical documentation file and conduct an internal review before submission to ensure everything is aligned and consistent. The third issue is lack of local representative or the local authorized agent. Many APAC countries require a local legal entity to act as a responsible party for your device. Without this, you may not be able to submit your file. So it's very important to appoint a local representative earlier and ensure that all the required documents such as a power of attorney and legal agreements are in place before the submission. Now, the final one is language and translation issues. Many regulators require documentation in local language. Poor translation can lead to inconsistencies and misinterpretation of a technical documentation. So it's important to use certified translator and also perform technical review of translated documents to ensure accuracy. So overall, the key takeaway from this slide is that these are all avoidable issues with the proper planning, internal review, local support, and you can significantly reduce the risk of delays. Moving on to the another slides, which have also described some of the common submission pitfalls. We'll go over this as well. Yeah. So let's continue with some additional common pitfalls that we frequently see, especially for the companies entering the APAC for the first time. The first one in this slide is the insufficient clinical evidence or a lack of local data. Many manufacturers assume that clinical data generated in a one country will automatically be accepted anywhere, but in reality, that's not always the case. For higher risk devices, the several APAC countries such as China, South Korea may require local clinical data, bringing study or additional justification to demonstrate that the device performs safely in their specific population. So, what's the best approach? You should assess clinical requirements early in your regulatory planning phase. Check whether the local trials or bridging studies are needed. If not, prepare a strong clinical evaluation report supported by literature and post-marketing data. The next one is a non-compliance with the local standard. Many companies rely heavily on the international standard like ISO or IEC, which is good, but they sometimes forgot that the local regulations may have additional or slightly different requirements. For example, certain countries may require specific testing method, country-specific standard, or additional documentation. If these are not addressed, regulator may request additional testing or clarification, leading to delays. To avoid this, it is important to perform gap analysis between the international standard and the local requirement and update your documentation accordingly before submission. Another important pitfall is failure to use accelerated or reliance pathway. This is something which is seen a lot. Companies go through these full registration process even when faster pathways are available, simply because they are not aware of them or they haven't evaluated them properly. For example, if your device has already approved in USA and have a FDA approval, you may be eligible for the abridged review in certain countries. Not using this pathway can result in unnecessary delays and higher cost. So evaluate all available pathway before deciding your submission strategy. The final one is a poor communication and with the regulatory authorities. This may sound simple, but it has a very big impact. When regulators send queries or deficiency letters, timely and complete responses are critical. Delay in responses or providing incomplete answers can significantly extend the review timeline. In some cases, it may even lead to rejection. So overall, the key message from this slide is success in APAC is not just about the meeting requirements, it's also about the planning ahead, being proactive, and making informed decision through the process. So now we have discussed the common pitfalls, the post-market responsibility. Now focus on something very important: how actually to reduce the regulatory risk proactively. Because in APAC, the difference between the smooth approval and the delayed one is often come down to how well you plan in advance. I'll walk you through the three key approaches that significantly reduce your regulatory risk. Yeah. So this is a slide. The first is adopting international standards, the strong risk management system early in the process. Most APAC regulators align with the global standards such as ISO for quality management and for risk management. So if your system is already aligned with these standards, you are starting from a very strong position. But it's not just about having these standards, it's about integrating with them properly. For example, your risk management file should clearly identify potential risks, evaluate their impact, and show how these risks are controlled. Regulators want to see that safety has been built into the design of your device, not added later. So the earlier you implement these systems, the smoother your regulatory journey will be. The second approach is conducting the early regulatory intelligence and the market assessment. Before you even start your submission, you should have a clear understanding of which pathway to use, what documentation is required, whether local clinical data is needed or not, what is the timeline. So let me give you a simple example. If you plan to enter China, but only realize later in the process that the local clinical trial is required, so you could delay your launch by an year or more. But if you identify this early, you can plan your studies in parallel with your submission preparation. So developing a country specific regulatory roadmap is really important. This helps you avoid the surprises and manages your timeline more efficiently. The third approach is continuous regulatory monitoring. APAC regulation are consistently evolving. New guidelines are introduced, existing rules are updated, and the new pathway are created. For example, we have seen rapid development in the areas like AI regulation, digital health, reliance pathway. If you're not actively monitoring these changes, you may miss opportunity or worse, fall out of a compliance. So companies should establish regulatory intelligence system, This could include monitoring updates from the regulatory authorities, participating in the industry forum, and regulatory reviewing the guidance document, and also ensuring that the internal teams are trained on the new requirement as well. So, to summarize, reducing the regulatory risk is not about reacting to the problems; it's about the anticipating them. So, if you align with the international standard early, plan your regulatory strategy in advance, and continuously monitor the changes, you can significantly reduce the delays, avoid the unexpected challenges, and improve your overall success in APAC regions. Now, moving to the next slide. Yeah, the post-market surveillance and the vigilance considerations for APAC. Many companies focus heavily on getting regulatory approval, but it is important to understand that compliance does not end once the device is on the market. In fact, the regulator are placing much greater emphasis on how manufacturers monitor and manage their devices after the commercialization. The first key point here is establishing a robust post-marketing surveillance system. This means having a structured process in place to continuously collect, evaluate the data about how your device is performing in the real world. Now it's very important. It's not just about collecting the data, you just need to actively analyze it as well. For example, if multiple complaints are coming in about the same issue, then it may indicate a potential safety concern. A strong post-marketing system allows you to identify these trends early and take action before the issue escalates. The another key element is adverse event reporting requirements. The certain events must be reported to the regulatory authorities within the defined timelines. This typically includes serious injury and device malfunctions. So companies need to have a clear internal procedures to identify and report these events in a timely manner. This include defined responsibility, who identifies the event, who investigates it, and who submits the report. Because any delay or a failure in a reporting can lead to a regulatory consequences. Another important area covered in the slide is of field safety corrective actions (FAS) and recalls. If a safety issue is identified, the manufacturer must take corrective action. This could include product recall, field safety notices, um, device modification, software update, or updates to a labeling or an instruction for use. And importantly, regulator usually require notification before these actions are implemented. They may also ask you to ask for a recall plan and progress report to ensure the issue is being properly managed. I have some more points to discuss about the post-market surveillance and the vigilance consideration. This is on this next slide that I'm sharing. So yeah, continuing with the post-marketing surveillance and the vigilance, this slide focuses on the additional requirements that manufacturer must manage after their device is placed on the market. The first important concept which I want to discuss here is traceability and the unique device identification, or which we call UDI. The UDI system allows both the regulator and manufacturer to track the device throughout the entire supply chain from manufacturing all the way to the end use. This is extremely important because if a safety issue arises, the company must be able to quickly identify a specific device or batch are affected. For example, if a defect is identified in a particular lot, traceability system allows you to locate those devices quickly and take targeted action instead of recalling all the products. So the UDI here plays a very critical role. The another one point which I want to discuss is local representative responsibility. In many APAC countries, the local representative is not only involved during the registration but also plays an important role when it comes to the post-marketing activities. Their responsibility typically includes submitting adverse event reports, coordinating recalls, and maintaining communication with the regulatory authority. This makes the choice of legal representative very important. A well-informed and responsive local partner can significantly improve how efficiently you manage post-market obligation. Another one point which I want to discuss in this slide is a post-market clinical follow-up, or yeah, this is what we call post-market clinical follow-up. For higher risk devices, regulator may require additional clinical data even after the device is already approved and marketed. This include observational study, registry data, or real-world evidence collection. The purpose of this very document is to continuously confirm that the device remains safe and perform the as expected over time. This is especially important for innovative or high risk devices where long-term data is critical. So this another one, yeah. So yeah, this slide also highlights about the regulatory inspection and audit. The regulatory authorities may conduct inspection to verify that your post-market surveillance and vigilance system are compliant. During this inspection, they may review compliant handling records, adverse event reports, leak call documentation, and overall quality management systems as well. So it is important to ensure that your system and documentation are always organized and audit ready. The final point which I want to discuss is about continuous regulatory monitoring. The post-market regulations are consistently evolving across the APAC. New requirements, updated guidelines, and changes in report expectations are introduced regularly. So companies need to actively monitor these changes, ensure that their internal processes and the teams are updated accordingly. So the key takeaway from the slide is the post-market compliance is ongoing responsibility. It requires strong system, clear roles, and continuous monitoring. Let's move on to our new next slide, which discuss about the sorry, yeah, how to plan effectively if you want to have a regional expansion in this region. Yeah. Now that we have covered the regulatory requirements, post-market expectation, and the risk consideration, let's move on to the final and very important topic, how to plan more effectively for a regional expansion in the APAC region. Because ultimately, the goal is not just to get an approval in a one country, but to expand successfully across the multiple countries. The first strategy here is the leveraging existing approvals. uh, this maybe I'm bringing this point again and again, but this is very important, and a lot of countries are actually using this approval pathways. So if your device is already approved and well established in a regulatory authority such as Health Canada, US FDA, or in EU, you should use that this approval pathway. Many APEC countries recognize these approvals and offer a bridge or reliance pathway, which significantly reduce your review timeline and even which reduce your cost as well. So instead of starting from scratch in every country, you can build your own existing approvals to accelerate market entry. Second point, which I want to discuss, is prioritizing the regulatory reliance pathway. For example, if your device is approved in Singapore, and you may able to use that approval to gain faster access in countries like Malaysia and Thailand. Now there are some sort of agreements between these Asian markets. The recently which I have viewed one was in Malaysia. They have a reliance pathway for the Malaysia for the Singapore market. If a device is already approved in Singapore, you can market that product in Malaysia as well. This is a recent one which I have seen. This create a strategic sequence where the approval in a one key market can support the expansion into other. So planning in the order of market entry becomes very important. The next one is leveraging the program like MedSAP, the medical device single audit program that can help streamline the quality management system requirements across the multiple countries. For example, it is particularly advantageous in in the markets like Japan and can support compliance with the ISO requirements in the other region as well. This reduces the duplication of audits and save both time and resources. Another important aspect is identifying high growth markets. Not all APEC markets be approached in the same way. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and Singapore are considered more mature, stable markets, well defined regulatory system, and strong demand, especially driven by the aging population and increasing healthcare needs. So these markets can often be a good starting point for expansion. At the same time, it's important to understand the regional variation. Asia is not a single market. For example, Japan has a very structured and predictable system. China has more complex system. Southeast Asia offers opportunity through harmonization initiative like Asian Medical Device Directive. So your strategy must be flexible and adapt to each country. Another key consideration is working with the local expert and appointing an independent local agent. Local regulatory consultant can help you navigate the country specific requirement, language barrier, and local expectation. And using this independent agent rather than the distributor linked registrations allows you to maintain control over your product registration and switch partners if needed. Finally, strengthening the supply chain and localization strategies is becoming increasingly important. Some countries may require local labeling, local testing, and other country specific adaptation. So, planning these aspects early can help you avoid delays later. So, to summarize, successfully regional expansion in APAC is not just about entering these markets. It's about entering them in strategically. If you leverage existing approval, use the reliance pathway, prioritize the right market, build the strong local partnership, you can significantly improve your speed, efficiency, and overall success in this region. And this is what really differentiate the companies that scale successfully across the APEC market from those who struggle. Before we wrap up, I just want to leave you with the one key thought. Expanding into the APAC region is a huge opportunity, but success here is not just about meeting regulatory requirements, it's about the planning them strategically, understanding the local expectation, being proactive at the every stage of product life cycle. So if you take one thing from today, that is the early you plan your regulatory strategy, the smoother your expansion will be. So here I will conclude my slide, and if you have any question, please feel free to bring that up.
Thank you so much, Kartika. That was so much great information. We do have some questions that are rolling in. You may have covered some of these things already, and they asked the question before you covered them. So I'm just going to go through them to make sure that everybody does have the clarity that they need on some of these topics. So the first question is, oh, and thank you for joining us on this part too, Jody. I appreciate you coming in now too. So how do country-specific definitions of the term medical device vary across these APAC jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think as Kartika mentioned, because there is a variety of not only definitions, but classifications from one market to another, it's really important that you look at the details of the regulations in each market. They can differ significantly within the Asia space as well as other global areas, especially when you start looking at software devices, wellness products, etc. Certain regulatory bodies will govern them more strictly with higher classifications versus others. So a specific country assessment of what is and is not a medical device, and where your product falls within that is going to be critical to your planning and success.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a few more, so we'll just kind of go through as many of these as we can until we get close to time for today. What are the key differences in classification rules between major APAC markets like China, Japan, and other ASEAN countries?
Yeah, I think again, this goes back to the classification structures within Asia. Most markets have a classification structure, but they do differ. Again, I've seen the most variety in terms of when a classification may differ from one market to another, when it falls into software products, combination products, or kind of borderline devices. So again, the specific country assessment is going to be necessary, and monitoring those classification structures is also critical, because over time, regulators do, especially as new novel products come about, they do modify the classification rules accordingly. Certainly, 15 years ago, there was nothing related to AI medical devices, and now that is coming about. So it's causing the regulators to update their definitions, update their processes and their classifications accordingly.
And then this kind of ties into some of the differences too. Are there country-specific requirements for unique device identification implementation across APAC?
Yes, absolutely. Not only in Asia, but globally as well. UDI was rolled out as a way to help not only regulators in countries track products within their market, but also for manufacturers as well to be more responsive if there is some type of adverse device or adverse event that they need to take action for. So countries are unfortunately not all harmonized in how they're rolling out UDI and the requirement. I know China, South Korea, and Saudi Arabia, as an example outside of Asia, all have UDI programs in place. You need to understand what the country-specific legislation has been adopted. We love to see when they're actually just harmonizing with other major markets, like the EU or the US, but that does not always happen. So.
Okay, then what are the labeling and language requirements across key APAC markets?
In terms of language, most Asian markets will require the local language be present in your labeling. So if you're selling into China, you're going to need simplified Chinese in your IFUs. This um, is a requirement. So sometimes it presents a problem for manufacturers if they haven't thought far enough ahead. And I'll give you an example for that. Many times manufacturers seem to focus on US and European market release. And then, of course, the sales team is like, we want to sell this product everywhere. If they haven't factored in those language requirements, they first have to get the IFUs and other labeling translated. But if they haven't planned ahead for it, your IFU is going to grow. It may or may not fit into your current packaging design. I've seen companies where they've had to absolutely start from scratch, uh, do stability testing all over again because they've had to modify their packaging to accommodate a larger instructions for use. Not all markets will allow you to have an electronic IFU. So understanding that requirement is important as well, so that you design your packaging and do all of your stability testing, your packaging testing, your transit testing after you have a design that will accommodate your product for a global market. In addition, from a labeling perspective, there are some markets that require additional things beyond the label. China is a good example. The license number that is issued when you get approval in China has to actually appear on the labeling. So being able to have a process in place within your organization to add that information to the labeling so that you can market is a key kind of post-approval activity that needs to be managed. Some companies struggle with accommodating one particular customer facing number or SKU to meet all of the global requirements. So I've seen some manufacturers actually create like a child SKU within their organization specific to the Asia market so that it can address Asia specific labeling and translation requirements.
Okay, thanks for that. So I don't know if you're going to have the answer to this, and the person that asked this question is not sure if you will or not either. But in which of the APAC markets do they also market also as veterinary medical device have to be certified and registered? Do you know anything about any veterinary medical device registration?
I know a little simply because I worked in that market for a short period of time. Most of the Asia Pacific do require it. I actually spent time with the veterinary regulators in Japan. I traveled there 5 times because I wanted a change in their process and had to go meet with them. It is a completely separate market. The regulatory intelligence that governs veterinary is as complex as medical devices or pharmaceuticals. So it's really important that you understand what those requirements are. If you're starting from scratch and you're not able to get the regulatory intelligence, there are a lot of in-country partners that you can utilize to help you navigate that process. But absolutely, there are requirements, there are strict requirements. It is complicated, and the submissions, the timelines for approvals, et cetera, are as complicated as medical devices.
Yeah, I thought I was going to throw you for a loop, but you know all the answers, so thank you.
Yeah.
So the next one is regarding recent joining of Malaysia to MBSAP, MSAP, is that how you say it, as an affiliate member? What can we expect from the regulatory perspective? And do we need to provide reporting now?
I'm not familiar with the timing, so I'll let Kartika speak to that if she knows. But in general, having any additional countries join the MDSAP program is only of benefit to you as a manufacturer, because what it does is it allows one audit. There'll be a notified body or an entity that can audit your organization for your quality management system. For that audit, they will ask you as a manufacturer which countries that subscribe to MDSAP are in scope, meaning you market there. They will do one audit, give you a certification for each of those countries so that those individual regulating authorities don't have to come and audit you. So, instead of 5 different audits that you might be subjected to, now you'll have one. It's important. I want to stress this because I've seen many manufacturers struggle with this piece. Just because you are ISO 13485 compliant does not mean that you will get through an MDSAP audit without also looking at country-specific requirements. I've seen folks get audit observations, as an example, in Canada, who's part of the MDSAP program. There is a specific requirement that if your ISO certifications have changed in any way, you have a specific time frame in which you need to report that to the Canadian agency. And auditors will look at those unique requirements for each country to ensure that you have a process in place and that you're adhering to that process. So I caution you, just because you're MDSAP compliant today, now that Malaysia, is jumping on board, you need to say and understand, are there country-specific things that will be looked at during that audit?
And Kartika, did you have anything else to add for that one, or do you feel like that covered everything.
And Judy has covered already.
Okay, perfect. So another question for South Korea, do we need to translate the entire English dossier into Korean for submission? IFU and labeling are multilingual.
I have gone through the document of South Korea. They do not actually are accepting the documentation in the English. Sometimes they in the coming future they might, but for now they are accepting only the translated version of the documents.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge for the Asia Pacific market in general because a lot of countries globally will require the translated language in your IFU and your labeling, but the actual submission package can be in English. Asia Pacific, a lot of countries require the native language for every single document that you submit to them. So, as Kartika mentioned in her presentation, it's important for those markets that you get a certified translation house to do that translation for you. Because it'll be a lot of documentation that needs to go to the local language. Making mistakes in that translation can be really detrimental to the review process because if things are not translated accurately, there may be misunderstandings with the regulatory authorities that will cause questions or delays during the review process. It's challenging for markets to some, for manufacturers to sometimes get through that because if they don't know the native language or they don't have a really good partner within the country itself, then they may not understand where those gaps are in terms of the translated version versus the, native English documents.
Sometimes it's hard to work with the translator as well because they don't understand that the requirement that each document needs, they don't put that exact requirement in across all those documents. So you really need to be working along with the translator if you hire a translator for these documents. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. A couple more questions we'll see if we can get through. If our product intended use as a non-in vitro diagnostic use for workplace only and it doesn't carry IVD symbol, can it be exempt from registration in APAC?
I don't think that's something we can answer on this call. We'd have to know a lot more about the product itself to help with that assessment and classification. Um, so I think understanding what the classification rules are and where your product falls will be the key part, but it's just not a question that we can answer during this webinar.
Okay. Okay, then how do cybersecurity and data privacy regulations impact medical devices in APAC?
There are certainly growing cybersecurity and privacy regulations growing not only in APAC but globally. Monitoring the regulatory intelligence for these different categories is critical. Just like a labeling requirement, cybersecurity is also something that you need to be very aware of if you have a software product. So again, I suggest that if you don't have someone monitoring all of these different categories in the regions, there are certainly providers such as RegDesk who can provide that regulatory intelligence for you. But it's important that you stay abreast of it in whatever way you're able to, because not understanding the differences in those requirements could be detrimental to your plan.
Okay, then we have another one. How do regulatory timelines compare across APAC markets? And this is probably the last one we'll have a chance to answer today.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety in terms of timeline and not just for the standard full assessment in each country, but the kind of abbreviated or reliance pathways as well. So most of the timelines are very are well documented by the agencies in terms of what the typical timeframes are. But I want to point out that where I've seen a lot of manufacturers struggle with these timelines, if there's a 180-day review time as an example, that clock stops ticking when they give you rounds of questions. And I've seen many organizations struggle with the response to questions in a timely manner for agencies outside of the US and the EU, because in many countries, they don't dictate when you have to respond. So your timeline can go from a standard 180 days to 2 to 3 years if you're not prioritizing the response to questions. Where that comes into play as well is if there is a country-specific requirement that you failed to recognize. Um, there are specific standards within China, as an example, that require very specific testing on certain devices. And if you have not factored that into your design and done that testing, your development team is going to have to go back and do that testing. That will delay your response and delay your time frame. So it's
Okay.
very easy to find the time frames by country. That's readily available, from the regulators. But I caution you to make sure that you understand what you can control in the process, and make sure that your organization is prepared to prioritize the questions.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think we've gotten to all the questions that we have. I know, Kartik, I saw you answered somebody's question as well in the chat. So thank you guys both for answering all those questions. To everyone that attended today, we appreciate you taking time to listen to us. If you have any additional questions, please send them along. And like I said before, the replay and the slide deck will be sent out by the end of the week. So be on the lookout for that. And Jody and Kartika, thanks again so much for your participation today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone.